Let's return to the news then that the energy firm EDF is to press ahead with plans to build a new nuclear power station in Somerset. Following that agreement, legally binding contracts will be signed and construction work can begin. But critics warn of environmental damage and potential escalating costs. They're also concerned that the plant is being built by foreign governments. A third of the £18 billion cost is being provided by Chinese investors. With us now is Chief Executive of the Nuclear Industry Association, Tom Greatrex, and Paul Eakins, Professor of Resources and Environment Policy at University College London. Thank you both for coming in. We've had it confirmed then, but Tom Greatrex, first of all, the board was split. It was nowhere near unanimous. 10 voted in favour, 7 against. How problematic is that?
Well, it's not problematic in the sense they've made the decision now. They've spent a long time, quite rightly, considering this decision and going ahead, because the £18 billion that we referred to, the construction cost, that is borne by the developer. EDF have to build it. The consumer doesn't pay anything until any electricity is generated. So it's quite right that they've taken a long look at it and get to a decision. That's exactly what you'd expect them or any other company investing in any significant infrastructure project to do.
We need, Paul Eakins, energy security in this country, like all countries do. How can we avoid having a nuclear power plant, or several of them, as part of that portfolio if we are to be self-sufficient for energy?
Well, clearly we have some nuclear power plants here. This one won't come on stream for another 10 years, so any thought that it's going to contribute to energy security issues before then, which is when a lot of coal plants and some nuclear plants will be closing, it clearly won't be contributing then. And we have plenty of time in the interim to build other cheaper forms of low carbon energy, and that's my main concern. My main concern is the cost to the consumer of this new deal.
Why don't we do that then, Tom Greatrex, when renewables are more reliable these days, and per megawatt hour this plant is going to be almost twice as much costly as other forms of electricity generation?
It's twice as much as the current wholesale price today. But the wholesale price over the course of the last 5 years has fluctuated between £28 a megawatt hour equivalent to £130 a megawatt hour equivalent. And if you're able to predict what the wholesale price is going to be in 10 years' time for the 35 years after that, remember this will be generating power for 60, probably nearer 70 years in the end. So it's a long-term project to give you the base load stability that can underpin a whole range of other low-carbon technologies. And if we're serious about meeting our climate change commitments and we don't want to be exposed to volatility of fossil fuel prices, which no government can control, then it makes sense to have some low carbon baseload. And nuclear is the only available way of doing that currently. And we haven't got a long time to wait. We can't wait and hope for technological development to happen, because by 2030, 65% of our electricity generating capacity from 2010, over that course of that 20 years, 65% of it will have gone offline, will have retired. We need to have some infrastructure ready to be able to fill that gap.
Why then should we not have nuclear as part of our portfolio, when you think that we've been promised that renewables will be completely reliable, we'll be able to store electricity generated from wind and solar, but that hasn't quite got there yet, has it?
Well, it hasn't quite got there, but it is getting there at an enormously fast rate, both in terms of the costs coming down of the main nuclear technologies, but also in terms of the storage that we will need in order to balance out the intermittency of those technologies. And my big problem with this is the number that Tom just mentioned, which is that British consumers are going to be tied into this new plant at an inflation-linked cost of what was £92.5 a megawatt hour back in 2012. It's an inflation-linked cost for 35 years at a time when the energy system is changing out of all recognition, and the main low-carbon competitor technologies are reducing in cost at a great speed, so that in 35 years' time, after this plant comes on stream, which will be about 2060, we will be paying an enormous sum of money at a time when other low-carbon technologies will still be much, much cheaper.
And we also had a member of the EDF board resigning, didn't we, because it doesn't feel that this was a venture that the company should be involved in. It was too risky in his view.
Well, I think as far as I can tell from the statement that came out from Reuters earlier this afternoon, his decision was based on a number of different factors, including factors affecting what EDF are planning to do in France, because this is, just one part of the issues that they were discussing at the board meeting today. But the point about, the amount of cost, there are offshore wind farms that got similar contracts signed at the same time as EDF for £150 and £140 a megawatt hour. So to say that that cost may be coming down, but we'll still be paying that during that period that those are generating power for the proportion of their time. And the power station will be generating power long beyond 35 years. It'll be 60 years and probably, realistically, probably even beyond that with lifetime extensions. And that is important to have that low carbon base load. That, electricity storage technology is really useful, but you've got to generate it before you can store it. And this and other forms can help you to do that.
But supporters of nuclear power say it's clean. Well, not at the end of its life, though, is it? Because we have to decommission, we have to deal with the waste, and that is a very expensive and dangerous thing to do. So how do you reassure people who are concerned about the environmental impact of that? Well,
on decommissioning, with new power stations, unlike the very early ones like at Sellafield, where that is still being funded, with the new power stations, the funding for that forms part of this. So the companies have to fund the decommissioning costs at the start and put that money away effectively to pay for the decommissioning at the end of it. Because you're right, nuclear power stations are expensive to build and then you have to decommission them. But then they run in the middle bit for 50, 60 years and beyond, very efficiently, producing a large amount of electricity without any carbon emissions at all. And with all things with energy, it's about a balance. There are lots of different energy sources. We've got to get the best balance possible, and I think we need some low carbon baseload as part of that mix, along with renewables, along with storage, along with demand technology and the other things that are developing. But I don't think we can do it without nuclear if we're serious about meeting those climate change commitments.
It is. We've got to think about climate change, haven't we? It's something that's a preoccupation, or should be, for all countries these days.
Absolutely, we have to think about it, but we also have the affordability issue, and we have to think about the cost of this stuff. And there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that by the time 2025 comes along, which is kind of the earliest time this nuclear power station is going to be generating electricity, there will be renewable sources allied to storage, interconnection and other things, which is very considerably cheaper even when this power station starts. And the costs are coming down. Tom's quite right. Offshore wind was commissioned at £150 a megawatt hour back in 2012. But now, the most recent one was £110 a megawatt hour, and in Holland they've just commissioned offshore wind farms for about £80 a megawatt hour, which is even now cheaper than we're looking at this nuclear power station coming on stream in 2025. It's quite clear to me that offshore wind is going to be very considerably cheaper by the time this nuclear power station is producing electricity, and the storage technologies will be there to be able to capture the wind when we're not using the power and use it when the wind isn't blowing and we want the power.
But the scale of that grid level storage is going to be apt to be absolutely huge. We have had frequently in this country, probably usually in early January or in February, periods of a week or maybe longer when there has been no wind, no sun, very cold temperatures, very high demand. All of those things mean that you're going to need some of that base load to be able to do that. Or the storage, the amount of storage you need is going to be absolutely huge, and it's not there yet. And I don't believe it's going to be there by 2025 or the time in which Hinkley is going to be generating power.
For those 1 or 2 weeks a year, then you can use gas, because the quantity of carbon emissions that you'll be producing over that period is relatively small.
We could go on all evening. Oh, you could.
We will.
I'm sure.
On other platforms.
Another time. Professor Paul Eakins from University College London and Tom Greatrex from the Nuclear Industry Association. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.